Senator Tom Cotton joins us now. Senator, we understand from Jackie Heinrich, who told us some deal points, this is what Russia wants. They want a ceasefire. They want elections in Ukraine to be involved in the final agreement. So why do they care about elections in Ukraine, in Russia, when they have just ridiculous elections?
Brian, probably because they want to meddle in them. Look, I think the reality on the ground in Ukraine is that Joe Biden left the world with a terrible mess. His weakness tempted Putin to invade in the first place. He pussyfooted around for 3 years. And it's clear in retrospect that his plan was to lose just after the election. So that's what we're left with now. We need to try to secure a durable truce that will protect, as J.D. Vance put it last week in Europe, Ukraine's sovereign independence. And we have to get creative about that. Look at what Lindsey Graham has proposed, that we have a United States-Ukraine deal for minerals in Ukraine. That would give Ukraine some opportunity for long-term economic growth post-war. It'd be good for the United States to get to reduce our dependence on China for those rare earth minerals, which is a vitally important matter, as I write about in my new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China.
Yeah, very interesting that Russia does want to meet with us. They say they want to get U.S. companies back in their country. We haven't heard that from Russia in about 20 years. So let's talk about your book. It's called 7 Things You Can't Say About China. It is out today. It is excellent, right to the point, and it talks to you about the urgency of confronting China, by far our most formidable opponent ever. And one thing came out yesterday is and this is really irking Red China, we took this from the State Department phrasing on Taiwan. We do not support Taiwan independence. That used to be in the State Department's doctrine. That was taken out, much to the chagrin of the Chinese. Why is that important?
Yeah, Brian, I wanted to write 7 Things You Can't Say About China to ring the alarm bell about China. Most Americans have a low opinion of communist China, but however dangerous they think the threat from China is, it's actually much worse. And the hottest flashpoint is potentially over Taiwan. Now, our position has long been that we don't support unilateral actions on either side of the Taiwan Strait, that we want the peaceful status quo. That statement about Taiwan's independence was an example of the Biden administration kowtowing to communist China, and that's no longer what we're going to do. We're going to support our friends in Taiwan. We don't want to see disruptive unilateral change. We want peaceful, stable relations in which communist China doesn't fulfill its long-held ambition of trying to invade and annex Taiwan, which would lead to an instant global depression and a war unlike anyone has ever seen in our lifetimes.
See, when people say, hey, you know what, they took Hong Kong, what's the big deal? They harassed Tibet and really absorbed that, what's the big deal? But Taiwan would change the global balance. In what way?
Taiwan is different. As I remind people in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, Douglas MacArthur called it the unsinkable aircraft carrier and submarine tender. He said it would be a disaster of utmost importance to the United States if it fell into hostile hands, namely communist China, then and now. Taiwan, for instance, has about 60% of all global semiconductor manufacturing. It has over 90% of high-end semiconductor manufacturing. So any kind of conflict over Taiwan, even an inconclusive one or one that we prevailed in, would lead to an instant global depression. That means stock market would crash, life savings would be wiped out, mass unemployment, to say nothing of the lives lost in that conflict. The only way to prevail is to deter it from happening in the first place.
What I love what you do is you go back in time to tell us how we got where we're at, all the way back to World War II and before that. And also in an excerpt today's New York Post, how the Chinese Communist Party has conquered Hollywood since the late 1990s. That is important, too. Senator, thanks for doing this book. I look forward to talking to you on the radio.
Thanks, Brian.
All right.